73 Yards was one of the most confusing episodes in Doctor Who's history, I would argue. So this video is going to be me trying my best to explain the ending and explain, or at least try and answer, many of the unanswered questions left by the episode. If you want to see my full review of the episode, it's up on the channel now, so you can go and check that out. I'm just going to say before we dive in, please feel free to subscribe, like, comment, share, turn on the notification bell, etc. It really does help me out a lot, and it allows me to keep YouTube as my part-time job. So any support, even just a comment, even a nasty comment, would be appreciated. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning and establish the facts. Why did the Doctor disappear? Because that's kind of the inciting incident of this plot. That's where this all begins. Well, I've written some notes, so don't mind me if I'm looking off screen, but that circle thing was created by some sort of mythic people or people using magic to keep out the evil Mad Jack, who is a myth and legend presumably allowed to sort of exist, or his creation will have happened, or he'll have broken through the barriers of the universe and become this real myth turned reality because of the 14th Doctor's sprinkling of salt back in Wild Blue Yonder, which is said to have broken down the universe and allowed in mythical things like the Toymaker, or Jinx Monsoon's Maestro, or probably the One Who Waits. But this Doctor stepping on that weird thing has caused Mad Jack to enter the timeline in the form of Roger A.P. Williams. Now, Roger Ap Williams becomes the Prime Minister, and obviously he's Mad Jack. He says so in that news item, so he's kind of evil. He wants to nuke the world, I guess. Which is a little bit of a James Bond villain thing, but just go with me on this. The Doctor stepping on those ancient things caused Mad Jack to come into our reality. Now, that creepy woman who was 73 yards away is following around Ruby, trying to influence her to stop Mad Jack, to sort of put the ruins back to the way they were, to fix the circle. It's the opposite of Planet of the Ood. The circle must not be broken. The circle must be reformed, and that is the motive of the 73 Yards mysterious old woman. And then, obviously, she becomes Ruby, or she is Ruby, or Ruby becomes her, but we'll get to that in a bit, because that's confusing. Then, obviously, in the big football pitch scene, Ruby ensures that this woman speaks to Roger Williams, so he goes a bit mental and runs away, and his plans for prime ministerial nonsense of nukes and stuff are kept at bay, and the world is saved. Ruby obviously knows that he's got these nuke plans because the Doctor mentions it at the start of the episode as well, so that ties in quite nicely. Then, when Ruby turns 80 years old, she becomes that woman. We're still kind of unsure why, because she is played by a different actress, so did she inhabit the form of this woman? Is that woman maybe like the guardian of that circle? The guardian of those ancient scrolls, and Ruby inhabits her body? I don't really know, and it's very vague, so let me know your theories on that particular thing in the comments down below. But Ruby, in the form of this old woman, whispers to her younger self and sort of sends hand mimes and tries to stop the Doctor from standing on and breaking the ancient circle. And since in that timeline, where the mysterious woman was at the top of the cliff, the Doctor doesn't step in the circle, Mad Jack is never released, and the problem of Roger Williams is completely solved, as he is Mad Jack, but if Mad Jack's never let out, then there is no issue. And you may have the questions of, well, why did Mad Jack wait 40 years to act? Well, I presume it's because he was sort of born as a baby in that time period, and then 40 years later, when he's aged 40, he's at the time where he's going to become Prime Minister, so it's all a sort of domino effect from that initial stepping on the circle to him becoming Prime Minister 40 years later. But then that does beg the question of, how does the Doctor know who Roger Ap Williams is if he's Mad Jack and Mad Jack hasn't been released from that circle thing yet? So that's still kind of unexplained. maybe you could argue, like, I mean, the Doctor said it in Boom, he's a temporal event, he's a much bigger bang than you bargained for. He is a Time Lord, so maybe his sense of timelines and understanding of certain events and fixed points in time is different, so maybe he could see that timeline, or maybe his memories were corrupted when he was near the circle. I don't really know. There's some other burning questions I have about this episode, which I've noted down here, and I'm gonna kind of give you the real-world explanations for, because if you have or haven't watched Unleashed, Russell answers certain questions in it, so I'll be regurgitating some of the real-world explanations, and then trying to theorise on sort of in-narrative canonical explanations for these questions, because that's the main disappointment, I can't lie, of this episode, is how many questions I was left with. Obviously, some ambiguity is always nice, especially in sort of mythical type stories, but this much confusion, yeah. Why does the TARDIS die or lock Ruby out? Like, you could kind of explain the TARDIS dying as it's part of the Doctor, I guess. The TARDIS is connected to him. More often than not, he'll be in the TARDIS or right outside the TARDIS to regenerate, and there's been a sort of long-standing idea of the Doctor and the TARDIS are linked in some way. I mean, the Doctor's wife kind of explores that in just a relationship sense, but more in like a genuine, like, almost they need each other to survive kind of way. I guess you could run down that train of thought. But why it locks Ruby out, I don't know. I mean, a problem with this episode is it's kind of like that good old Simpsons clip of, I don't know, a wizard did it. Whenever you notice a plot hole, I don't know, the sprinkling of salt did it. A magic thing did it. The answers aren't black and white. A bigger question that I was left with, though, is why does Ruby have the capability to do all of this weird stuff? Like, if old Ruby isn't, as I've suggested, like, the guardian of whatever that circle thing is, and she is just old Ruby, why does she always appear 73 yards away from Ruby and not age? And how does this work? You could argue, maybe, as I have done in a recent video, that Ruby, like, this is going to sort of be explained and revealed a little bit more later on, but what if Ruby is a god? Obviously, this season's been talking about themes of gods and myths and legends coming into the universe, so maybe Ruby herself is a god, hence why she has these powers, and she only realises when she's older that she can utilise them to save the day. Why was she always 73 yards away? Why didn't she just go up to her younger self and tell her how to solve the problem? Because she's kind of inadvertently doing that anyway, so why couldn't she just speak to herself? Why is she always kept at 73 yards? Because it's not like she walks away, she just sort of appears 73 yards away, which is really creepy, really spooky, and a good story mechanic, but the logic behind it is a little bit flimsy. I mean, the real-world explanation is Russell wanted to know how far away someone would be, where you can just about make them out, but they're a bit blurry, and you can't really tell who they are. So he went himself down to Swansea Pier and stood, and he measured about, when it's 73 yards away, that's when people become kind of unrecognisable, but kind of recognisable. So he went with 73 yards, which, to give him credit, is a banging title, banging name, and banging sort of urban myth. But then why did the photos blur? Like, even units who have really good technology try and take a picture of this woman and their photos are just blurry. Like, why does like, it's creepy that you can't take a good photo of this woman or get a good look at her, because obviously then you'd probably realise it's Ruby but old. But why? And then the biggest question of all, what on earth did she say to everyone to make them run and scream like that? It happens to Susan Twist's hiker character, it happens to Ruby's mum, it happens to Kate Stewart, it happens to everyone, which, yeah, it's very Curse of Clyde Langer, very creepy, a very cool idea, but what does she actually say? Well, if you want the reality, Russell says we're never going to know. We're not supposed to know. And if you want to go and watch Unleashed, the behind-the-scenes show, Stefan Powell, the host, does go round asking different cast and crew members what they think it is that the woman says, because it's deliberately left ambiguous, which it's a bit frustrating. But also, I do understand it. I think if that was the only question after the episode aired, I'd be fine. But there's so many questions, it's a little bit annoying. And obviously the actual actress of this woman has said all the hand signals she was doing was just a silly pattern. She was saying like, ooh, I can't remember, but it reminded me of Mr. Tumble, how he does his like, hello, and all of that. I thought that it was going to tie into the story and be a really clever usage of like sign language or something, and she was going to be doing something of meaning with her hands, but no, she's just sort of waving her hands around. And why? Because I feel like it would be a lot more creepy if she was just stood there. The fact that she's waving her hands around now, I thought was going to have a cool explanation and kind of be a Chekhov's gun, like it gets answered in the third act, but no, she's just waving her hands around. But those are all the big questions I had after the episode. Maybe I've missed some out and I'll try my best to answer them. So drop any questions or theories you have in the comments down below. I really would appreciate it. Please do remember to like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. Thank you very much for watching and goodbye.